Good morning, everyone, and welcome to 15 Minutes with Lori. I feel good to be back in town, and today we are going to talk about some of the challenges that we face with contingencies and how to overcome some of them. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to bring up the contract because it's just a reminder of all the things that we need to be aware of on the contract. We have contingencies all over the place in the contract, and it is to protect the clients. And in some cases, it's there to protect the seller as well. So, the contingencies start with the inclusions and exclusions. I know you may think that that's not a contingency, but it really kind of is, because when there are things that the buyer wants to keep in the home versus having items removed, it does make it a contingency, because if somebody doesn't do the right thing, then there can be ramifications for that. The financing aspect. So when financing is becoming a little harsh and things are not going as smoothly as possible, as they should be, always make sure that we are following that loan contingency deadline, and that goes off of the acceptance deadline date. So whenever the buyer makes an offer and they put on there that the seller is to accept the property no later than, or the offer no later than a time and a date, that's your acceptance deadline. So we need to make sure that we have that loan commitment by then. If you're not going to extend that loan commitment deadline, or find out what the buyer's options are. If they're going to be denied, you have to have that denial letter by that contingency deadline. And that denial letter must be on the terms of the contract. And it states that on the contract, that if a denial is going to be made, it must be on the terms of the contract and no other. Okay. What are some things that a buyer can do if the financing is not going as planned? They can find out if there's another option for them as far as what type of loan. Maybe they were going for conventional. Maybe they would, maybe it would work out for an FHA. So there are different programs out there that lenders can offer the buyer that might help them, might work it out. If that particular lender isn't working it out, they can always talk to another lender. If there's another lender who thinks that they can get them approved, then go for it. The contract does not state that a specific lender has to be used. So that buyer has the ability to talk to a different lender if they so choose. You just have to make sure that you're following that deadline. Okay, let's talk about title and survey. Title work, we all get, if you're a buyer's agent, you will receive title work. And it comes and it's going to look like title insurance or title policy. You need to watch for that. We find that is not in dot loop as it should be. And my concern with that is, if you don't have it, did you look at it? And we've got to make sure that we're protecting our buyers to make sure that that title is taken care of if there's issues on it. And that goes along with the survey as well. So if there's encroachments on the survey, or there might be abandoned easements and things like that, we've got to make sure that we are addressing those things by going to the seller with the title and survey notice, asking them to fix whatever item it might be on the title work and or the survey. If the seller says no, they're not going to fix those things, the buyer has the right to ask the seller to obtain, to be reimbursed for an appraisal, a survey, the title work, any inspections, anything that they spent money on prior to getting that title in, and the seller saying no. The buyer has the right to ask the seller for reimbursement for those expenses out of pocket. And it does state that in the contract. So make sure that you ask the title company. I would reach out to Title Weekly and say, how is title going? How is the survey going? Because you need to make sure that you're following up with that and obtain a copy of that within 25 days of that acceptance deadline, as it states here on line 129. Okay, so things that on title that could be issued, an issue. Judgments, abandoned easements. It could be non-payment for certain utilities. So there's a lot of things out there. Excuse me, okay, let's see.
But where is he today? Is he suing the Trump administration?
If you're not muted, please mute yourself. Thank you. Okay, so anyways, back to title, so if you're not understanding that title work when you get a copy of it, because it is in legal terms and sometimes we don't always understand what it states, contact the title company and ask them questions. Make sure what's on there is either good and it's going to be clear title, or there's an issue with the title. You can always talk to the brokers as well, myself, Bill, or Mark. We would be happy to review it with you and talk about what next steps might be taken. But by the way, if you're going to issue a title and survey notice how it says title and survey. So if you have a problem with title, don't automatically send that without having that survey in yet. Because like the home inspection contingency, you have to have everything in line before you send that notice. So you must have your title and your survey before you send that notice. So both of those items need to be on there, okay? Going on to inspections. So inspections, if none stated, need to be done within 10 days of the acceptance deadline date. And when there are issues with the inspection, the buyer has the right, as we all know, to ask the seller to either fix the items or make a monetary adjustment of the closing, of the sale price, or ask for a credit. If they're going to ask for a credit and there's already a credit on the contract for financing, make sure you talk to the lender about the maximum amount allowed for credits. So if there is a credit and it's going to be too much, then you're going to need to make a monetary adjustment of the sale price. Remind your buyers, though, that a home is maintenance, right? And there's going to be things that they're going to have to take care of on their own. Look for serious problems. Look for hazardous, dangerous, things like that, expensive items. The little things like tightening a case over an outlet, or certain little items, and they'll be noted on the inspection what items that need to be addressed but maybe aren't critical that can be done. Sometimes the inspectors will explain to the buyers what they need to do to fix the item, and it's not a big deal. So don't encourage your buyer to ask for everything. You're setting them up for failure on being able to close that. Now, if the buyer wants to ask for everything, obviously we have an obligation to make sure that that is on the inspection notice. However, please try to explain to them, the things that they can do on their own to fix a few minor things, but the larger items, anything that might be dangerous, a safety issue, anything that's really expensive, obviously we know that we want to address those. But make sure you're explaining all of that to your buyer. I know that we are not the professionals in making those repairs, but the inspector can talk to them about that. And I understand there might be some inspectors who kind of dramatize things and scare the buyers. Bring your buyers in after that inspection. Go over that inspection with them. Talk to them through it and about it. Tell them, talk to, a reputable contractor, talk to an electrician, talk to a plumber, anything that is a specialty that is within that inspection. And so that maybe they can have their mind at ease a little bit. We see a lot of mutual releases because of inspection notices. Just make sure that we are explaining to our buyers, what to look for. And, anything can be fixed, right? I know that there can be a price on it. There's no harm in asking the seller to make those repairs. There's no harm in asking them for a monetary adjustment. And I know that sometimes we can't control what the seller is doing if we're representing the buyer, right? But make sure that when you're having conversations with that other agent, keep it professional, keep it calm, stick to the contract, and try to work it out. Building relationships with the other agents is not going against our representation with our clients, as some might think. It is building a connection with that other agent, working the deal smoothly, calmly and trying to get to the closing table, because that is the goal of your buyer. And obviously that's the goal of the seller as well. When you're representing a seller, before you list that property, talk to them about what to look for if the buyers are going to do an inspection. Talk to them a little bit about cost, of what it would cost to do some of the things that might take place. If there's radon in the basement, I would tell them probably $1,200 to $1,500. If there's termites, you guys work with these all the time and you kind of have an idea. You can't give them exact numbers, obviously, but you can kind of give them a roundabout what things are going to cost. So the sellers need to be aware that when the buyers go in with their inspector, that inspector is going to pick that house apart. But that's okay. They're representing that buyer and they're going to find everything. But let the sellers know that, hopefully that the buyer will not ask for everything, because obviously we talked about that a little bit ago, that owning a home, there is going to be maintenance involved. But let's keep calm, work it out with the agent as well as the clients, and always remember it is between the buyer and seller, not between the agents. So I know sometimes it becomes frustrating. Try not to show your frustration to your clients, and try not to show your frustration to the other agents. Try to stay calm, try to work the deal out with the other agent and with the clients as well. Because remember, it's between buyer and seller, okay? Insurability, I know insurance, especially lately, there couldn't be problems with getting insurance on whatever property that the buyer is buying. So always make sure that you focus on that as well. We have a tendency to look over that contingency, but it's important to make sure that you let your buyer know they need to go out and get their insurance immediately to make sure that there's no issues. Obviously, the government inspection and occupancy request, that is the responsibility of the seller when using the residential sale contract, but it is not on the special sales contract. So when the seller orders their inspection, they do not have to share the report with the other agent and the buyer, unless they have issues that they are not going to take care of. Okay, so remember that they do not have to share that report with the buyer unless there are issues they're not going to take care of. Okay, it does not say in the contract that they have to issue that when they are going to fix anything that has been flagged. Okay. And then also, prior to closing, the seller then will have to issue a past report. It is the buyer's responsibility then to go get the permit, okay? So always make sure that the buyer understands that they're not going to get the permit from the seller. They need to go get the permit, but the seller will have a past report, okay? Let's see here. What am I missing this morning? The access and final walkthrough. Always make sure that your buyer does a final walkthrough within 4 days of closing, and any issues that come up, you need to fill out a walkthrough notice. Okay, so the walkthrough notice doesn't give final on whether or not somebody is going to take care of something and be released from it. But you have to refer back to paragraph 13, where it talks about the promise that the buyer and seller made to each other. And if something has been broken, then the other one can be in breach of that person can be in breach of contract. Okay. The contract also states that closing does not relieve the buyer or the seller, of any agreements, repairs, or anything like that they have made. Okay. I'm going to end it there because it's at 15 minutes, but always remember to stick to the contract when dealing with these contingencies. And when there are issues, please contact myself, Bill, or Mark to kind of help things out. But always remember, stay calm, have fun. And this is a great career. And I know you guys are doing a great job and we appreciate you. Have a great week, everybody. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you. Thanks, Lori.
Thank you.